away, always watching him that afternoon. When he returned to the ranch, he found Rosaura crying in the yard. "What happened?" asked Martin, alarmed. "It's Abelino. He came back." Martin frowned. It couldn't be possible. He walked towards the stable. And there was the donkey, tied up and with obvious signs of having been beaten. He had open wounds and his breathing was labored. "What did you do to him?" "Rosaura didn't come at all. I don't understand how, but here he is." Martin felt a lump close his throat. How had Bellino returned? And those wounds, he didn't remember hurting him so much. He decided not to answer and locked himself in the house, immersed in his thoughts. That night, when the silence of the ranch became complete, Martin woke up with a start. At first he didn't know what had alarmed him, but then he heard it. The sound of hooves pounding the ground, this time louder than before. It seemed to come from everywhere, as if they were inside of his room and at the same time outside. He got up slowly in a cold sweat and lit the oil lamp, but before he could inspect the place, a voice began to be heard among the hooves. It was a low but clear whisper. "You are a cruel man, Martin." The voice was harsh and guttural, filled with a tone that seemed to spit contempt. Martin looked around but saw nothing. Then the sound of the hoofbeats stopped and for a moment all was sepulchral silence. But just when he thought it was all over, the voice returned. Louder and in a mocking tone, "Martin, I'm looking at you." The man felt his legs buckle. He dropped the lamp to the floor, breaking it and extinguishing the flame in the gloom. The sound of hoofbeats began again, faster, closer, and it was unknown how long it took before everything went completely silent. When he dared to move, he lit another lamp, trembling, and plucked up the courage to look outside. In the courtyard the moonlight came down. There was Abelino standing in front of the door with those eyes. The shimmering lights that seemed to pierce through him. Martin slammed the door shut and kept praying, but deep down he knew that this was not enough. Martin could not take it anymore. Fear had gotten into his bones and he could not see a way out of the situation. Every time he looked at Abelino, he felt that the animal knew things that no one else knew, as if it was silently judging him. And that morning he made a decision. He would seek help in town, and there was only one person who might know something about what was going on. He walked to the last street of the pueblo where Don Eliseo lived, an elderly healer whom many feared and respected. When he arrived, he knocked on the old wooden door and waited restlessly. Finally, Don Eliseo appeared, looking at him with a frown. "What are you looking for here, Martin?" asked the old man in a deep voice. Martin swallowed and explained everything, from the first nights of noises to Abelino's inexplicable return. When he finished, Don Eliseo kept silent for a moment, looking at him with a mixture of compassion and warning. "That donkey is not a common animal, Martin," he said at last in a firm tone. "There are things you shouldn't have disturbed, but how do I fix this?" "What can I do?" asked Martin, almost pleading. The old man shook his head. "It's not something I can solve, it's not something I can solve," he said. "That creature is not here by accident and now it's up to you to deal with it." Martin left the curandero's house more confused and terrified than before. Don Eliseo's words echoed in his mind. "You shouldn't have disturbed." What did he mean by that? What had he done to deserve it? On his way back to the ranch he found Abelino in the stable, standing as always with that look that made him feel guilty. Rosaura, worried about Martin's condition, tried to talk to him, but he didn't want to listen to her. "Leave me alone, this is my business," he said, trying to sound firm, although his voice trembled. That night, while Rosaura slept, Martin stayed awake. The healer's words had left him restless, but they had also awakened in him a strange guilt. So he decided to do something he never thought he would do. He went out to the stable, knelt down in front of Abelino and began to. "I don't know what you are or what you want from me, but if I did something to you, forgive me. I only wanted a donkey to work with, not for this. Please leave me alone." The donkey looked at him motionless, as if listening to every word. Martin felt a lump in his throat, waiting for some kind of reaction, but Abelino did nothing. He just watched him in silence, which was somehow even more terrifying. That night, Martin tried to sleep, but sleep did not come. Just as he was about to close his eyes, a noise startled him. It was a rustling sound, as if something heavy were moving around the room. He quickly got up and grabbed a machete he had near his bed. He walked cautiously towards the living room, trying not to make any noise. When he arrived, what he saw froze him in his tracks. Abelino was inside the house, standing in the middle of the living room. His hooves echoed on the wooden floor as he took slow steps towards Martin. "How did you get in?" Martin muttered, unable to move. Before he could react, the voice came again. This time it was not a whisper but a deep, rumbling sound, as if it came from the bowels of the dirt. "Martin Arden." The voice, "No, "You don't understand what you have done. You are not the first, but you will be the last." The donkey continued to move slowly forward, and although his mouth did not move, Martin knew that the voice came from him. "Tell me what you want from me," said Martin, backing up until he hit the wall. "Your blood," said Abelino. The donkey walked towards him with his eyes like embers, and the man only pretended to gasp. His voice wouldn't come out, but suddenly the light came on. "What's the matter, man?" said the woman, yawning from sleep. "Donkey," said Martin, and then realized that Abelino was not there, so without another word he walked to the bedroom. After that incident, 12 nights went by where everything seemed to return to normal. However, the relief was short-lived. At 3 a.m., Martin was awakened by a dry and constant noise, like a knocking sound. It was in the barn. When he turned to the bed, he noticed Rosaura was there. His heart skipped a beat. He jumped up, took his machete and left the house. With fear tightening his chest, he walked stealthily towards the stable. Trying not to think the worst, though with every step he took he felt his world crumbling. When he pushed the wooden door, what he saw left him paralyzed as if time stood still. There was Abelino and, next to him, Rosaura. They were in a position that Martin would never have imagined in his worst nightmares, as his wife and his donkey were intimate. Martin screamed, dropping the machete in shock. She didn't react. Instead, Abelino turned his head slowly toward him. Her eyes, dark and deep as a bottomless well, looked at him fixedly. It was then that Martin heard the voice, the same voice he had heard before, but now clearer and firmer. Martin said, "Abelino, life gave you a good woman and you made her existence a torment. Many nights she cried asking me to stop you. I gave you the chance to change, but you never did." Martin tried to move forward, but his legs did not respond. It was as if something invisible was holding him in place. "Now your wife is mine, Martin. You will never see her again." Rosaura let out one more moan. And Martin screamed in desperation, but he couldn't move. He felt something cold grab his ankle and suddenly he was dragged backwards. He was carried to his room where the door slammed shut. Martin forced with all his strength, but it was useless. He was trapped in the room, forced to listen to Rosaura's panting and the noises coming from the stable all night long. His mind could not process what was happening. It was as if hell itself had descended on his ranch. When the sun began to rise, the door to the room burst open. Martin ran desperately toward the barn, but there was no sign of either Abelino or Rosaura. Everything was silent, as if nothing had happened. He searched everywhere but found no sign of anything. From that day on, Martin lost everything. He wandered the roads asking whoever he met if he had seen a donkey and a woman named Rosaura, but no one knew anything. Eventually he became a homeless man who went crazy, and until the day he died he never stopped asking about Rosaura and her donkey, but nobody knows what happened to the donkey and the woman. In the village it is said that Martin was the victim of something bigger, something that does not belong to this world.